asking a question for clarification? Like, just focusing on this transition, how are we, like, what are the goals for this transition in meeting long-term graduation goals?
Well, it's really right now a question. Would we better serve our middle school students if we had a consolidated school, each of the feeders into the high schools? Would we be able to provide stronger programs for all middle school students that consistently those opportunities are available to all middle school students? Would we be able to better utilize our resources and also support teachers? Some of our teachers in some of our small schools get isolated. And so would they have a better opportunity to support student success in a team? So really it's about a question that this conversation going forward will be focused on finding answers, answering that question. Would we better serve our middle school students if we were had a 6-8 school that all of our 6-8 students, our 11, 14-year-olds went to? And would we also better serve our elementary students in a pre-K-5 setting if those teachers and principals and staff would be able to focus specifically on elementary level skills and needs?
Okay, so then a follow-up question. With the CTE being implemented into like the middle schools, which right now are the K through 8s, would we focus most of our CTE resources into the middle schools so that they kind of have a more even out education going into the high school?
That's part of that question about would we better be able to strengthen the programming and opportunities for students. Definitely this board, as any board in Tennessee, should consider and this board has considered and has supported those CTE STEM career exploration opportunities absolutely should continue to be offered to our middle school students leading into our high schools, preparing for high school. So yes, it would be an opportunity to consider strengthening and making sure every middle school student has that level of quality.
And do you think that you would start implementing bits and pieces in like RTI time starting in the elementary school so that they can,
Right.
dip their toes in and then can almost just like step by step get them to high school, get them out, get them into a career?
The career exploration, at least being aware should begin as early as kindergarten. And just so, and that happens. I mean, that happens now. Our elementary classrooms talk about careers and our elementary students ask questions. So yeah, it would definitely be something we continue to do in our pre-K-5s, if that were the case, as it is currently done in our pre-K-8s. Right.
Now let's pause here for a second and pay attention to what just occurred. This high school student right here, she just fired off a bunch of questions to the superintendent, Mr. Boyd, that a lot of high school students wouldn't do. She displayed a level of intelligence here, and she impressed a lot of people in the room with the type of questions she was asking. She showed that she was very engaged with what was going on. And so Mr. Ervin here, he was impressed by that. And prior to this point, we're over an hour into this meeting now. They've already, if you watch the entire video, you can see that they've already talked several times in the meeting. They weren't talking loud as to, so that they could be heard by the entire room, but they've talked back and forth several times, and they've laughed a few times. But it was just normal, talking that you would do in a meeting, but it wasn't so that they could, be heard by the entire room. But it was enough that they knew each other. So he understood which high school, by this point, he understood which high school she attended, which was the exact same high school that he had graduated from in 1984, which was David Crockett High School. So at this point, Mr. Ervin here, he's now turning in his seat because, she's just asked all these questions. So now, what would be the reason at this point in the meeting for him to turn in his seat and to compliment her. So you got to think about this before we proceed and watch him, compliment her. And think about this. And he's going to touch her on the shoulder, and he's going to make the sound like he's getting burned. Because remember, he believes that she is on fire with her questions. Now, whether or not you think that word is, appropriate, the way he worded it, yeah, it was, that kind of wording can definitely be taken out of context. And no, not everybody's gonna, call somebody, hot, say, God, you're hot, or something like that. Yeah, if you're on fire, most people are gonna say, wow, you were on fire. But, in the moment, this was the words he chose. And he even later stated, yeah, that was the wrong choice of words to use in that moment. But this is what the man said. This guy, like I've said in my other videos on this subject, he's not a college professor. He's not an English teacher. He's a farmer. He's a simple man. And if a coach had done this to a student on a football field, nobody would have blinked an eye. But, hey, this is what he chose to use at the time. And he realized, he knows he's being recorded. All these meetings are recorded. He knows who's in the room with him. So let's just pay attention to what happens. So here we go.
God, you're hot. You know that? Dang. Where'd you go to school at?
I have a Crockett.
All right.
Pause. Okay, let's look at this picture here for a second. Notice everybody has a smile on their face. This uniformed law enforcement officer right here, he's smiling. This gentleman's smiling. This lady is smiling. This lady in the back, she is smiling. There's another law enforcement officer back here. Everybody seems to be okay with what just occurred here. They don't seem to be uncomfortable. A person's facial expressions can tell you a lot about what they actually think and what they actually believe about a situation. So if any of these individuals actually believe that what Mr. Ervin had just said to this young lady was inappropriate, or what he had just done was inappropriate, it sure as heck doesn't seem to show in their facial expressions. I know for myself, if I had heard a full-grown man say something inappropriate to an underage girl, or do something inappropriate to an underage girl, I don't think I would be standing there or sitting there grinning or laughing about it. I would at least have somewhat of a serious look on my face, even if, say for the sake of argument, I wasn't going to do something immediately in the meeting, just because there's other people present or because there's a camera rolling. But if you understand what actually occurred here, nobody in this picture, none of the board members, did anything until a 10-second video clip went viral, and they found out that all of these parents who saw this clip that went viral were, upset about it. So then they had to make a decision on to either defend Mr. Ervin and explain to them that either his remarks were taken out of context, or they were going to tell the parents that, okay, yes, his remarks were bad, or that they were inappropriate, and therefore we're going to censor Mr. Ervin. Because think about it. If they try to defend Mr. Ervin, they're going to take a risk of putting themselves in the same boat as Mr. Ervin. And if they do that, they run the risk of going down with Mr. Ervin. And most politicians, they're not going to do that. they're going to want to separate themselves from the situation. They're not going to take the risk. And so they're going to, if they're worried about getting voted back into that position in the next election, they're not going to want to be known as some kind of pedophile defender, because once people get triggered by a 10-second video clip, they know it's going to be very hard to convince people that it was taken out of context. Because you've already got thousands of people signing some petition to try and remove this guy, which, that it was change.org, which, that doesn't mean anything because the voters have to actually decide, not change.org. But anyways, they're aware that there's a lot of people in the community upset about it. So they don't want to take the risk. So they had to decide how they were going to go about it. This is damage control. So they took it upon themselves to accept the narrative of the mob, that everybody believed it was inappropriate. And so they all said, okay, his words were inappropriate, so we're going to censor him. And that's what they did. But you can see in the picture, they don't believe that. Not a single one of them believes that. But they did what politicians normally do. But yes, Mr. Ervin's comments, his choice of words, clearly, even he said himself, that was a poor choice of words. He could have used better words. But, people don't always use the best choice of words in the moment. And he clearly didn't use the right choice of words. But when you look at the situation, that was the only reason to compliment her, was based on what she had literally just done. It doesn't make sense for the man to the one time that he's going to say something out loud in front of the entire room of close to 60 people with a camera rolling, and he knows it's being filmed, and there's 2 uniformed law enforcement officers present. It does not make any sense for him to objectify an underage girl in that moment. So either this guy didn't mean as it's being portrayed, or he is the worst pedophile ever. So you can be the judge of that, but clearly this, in my opinion, this was clearly taken out of context. And it was just a simple case of this guy chose the wrong words, and someone was easily able to take a 10-second clip, put it on the internet, and say that this guy used an inappropriate, he spoke to her, with inappropriate words.